Now recording. All right, I see you. All right, thanks, Hazel. All right, well, welcome everyone to the April meeting of the Environmental Quality Board, or EQB. My name is Nancy Aubenberger, and I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and honored to be the chair for EQB. So with that, I think we will then go to roll call. Executive Director Nussler, would you go ahead and call the roll? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. All right, Commissioner Arnold, I believe could not join us. Commissioner Arnold, are you out there?
He's traveling today.
Okay, Board Member Bakken.
Present.
Board Member Bauerkemper.
Present, thanks.
Board Member Brands.
Hello, present.
I don't believe Commissioner Cunningham is with us. Do we have Assistant Commissioner Kunis? Chair Dobbenberger?
Here.
Commissioner Gronval? Board Member Hintz?
Here.
Chair Holman?
Here.
Board Member Katzenberger?
Present.
Commissioner Kessler?
Present.
Board Member Martin?
Yes, hi.
I don't believe Commissioner Verelek could join us. Do we have Deputy Commissioner McKinnon?
Here.
Board Member Nelson?
Present.
Commissioner Peterson?
Here.
Board Member Smith?
Present.
Commissioner Stroman?
Present.
And Chair Zelli could not be with us today, but in person we have Peter Lindstrom, who is our new proxy for Met Council. I don't know, Peter, if you want to let you say hi for a moment.
Hello, everybody. Peter Lindstrom. Great to be here.
Sorry to put you on the spot there. Did I miss anybody? All right, well, we have 16 members, voting members present here today, and a quorum is 9.
Great. All right, well, thanks for going through all. Again, thank you all for being here. And then next on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, which is the meeting minutes from the February 19th, 2025 EQB meeting. And the preliminary agenda for today's April 16th EQB meeting. So the meeting minutes, packet page 5, and then the preliminary agenda is packet page 3. So I think we're likely to vote on the bylaws today. I'd like to motion that we amend the agenda to include public comment prior to voting on the bylaws. So apologies for the omission in the original agenda. We do generally have a comment period when we vote on something, so just kind of missed that. We're sending that out. So could I have ask for a motion on that, right? Or am I making the motion?
I think you could make the
I'll
motion.
make that motion to amend the agenda to include comment period before we vote on the bylaws. Could I have a second on that motion?
I will second.
Member
that.
Katzenberger seconds.
Thank you. All right. With member Katzenberger. Okay. All right. And is there any discussion on that motion? Okay. Hearing none. So are we calling the roll?
I'm going to call the roll on the addition to the agenda, and then we'll call then we'll call the roll on the whole thing. So sorry, you're going to hear your names a lot at this meeting. That's all right. All right, so this is the roll call on the addition to the agenda of comment period on the bylaws. Board Member Bakken.
Support.
Board Member Bauerkemper.
Yes.
Board Member Brands.
Yes.
Chair Dobbenberger.
Yes.
I skipped Commissioner Arnold because she's not with us. Commissioner Gronval, not with us. Commissioner Cunningham isn't with us. Sorry, I'm catching up. Board Member Hintz.
Yes.
Chair Holman.
Aye.
Board Member Katzenberger.
Yes.
Commissioner Kessler.
Aye.
Board Member Martin.
Yes.
Commissioner Verelek is not with us. Board Member Nelson,
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson,
Aye.
Board Member Smith,
Aye.
and Commissioner Stroman.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all. So that amendment passes. Now we go to approval of the new agenda and the minutes. If someone wants.
Oh, yeah. Could we have a motion on approving so it's not a consent agenda. We don't call it that anymore because we made a change to it, but the new preliminary agenda for today's meeting as well as the meeting minutes from last EQB meeting, which is February.
I will make that motion.
Chair. Commissioner Stroman, is there a second on that?
I can do that. This is Commissioner Kessler.
Thank you, Commissioner Kessler. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, so why don't we go ahead and do the roll call on the approval of that?
All right. So this is the motion to approve the amended agenda and the minutes from the February meeting. Commissioner Arnold is not present. Board Member Bakken.
Aye.
Board Member Bauerkemper.
Yes.
Board Member Brands.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham is not with us. Chair Daubenberger.
Yes.
Commissioner Gronval is not with us. Board Member Hintz.
Yes.
Chair Holman.
Aye.
Board Member Katzenberger.
Yes.
Commissioner Kessler.
Yes.
Board Member Martin.
Yes.
Commissioner Verilek is not with us. Board Member Nelson.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Yes.
Board Member Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Stroman.
Aye.
Thank you. That is 13 in favor.
Okay. So then, motion carries, minutes and agenda are adopted, and then that brings us to the executive director's report. So go ahead, Dean Ursler.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today here in April. Appreciate it very much. Our usual logistical reminder, the meeting is being recorded. And you all will notice in the room, if you haven't been here before, when we've experimented with this this camera, it will follow you. So I'm hoping that will make it easier for those of you out in the world to see who's talking and what's happening, and that we won't have to switch cameras. And if you have any feedback on it, I'm happy to hear it at some point. We went through a bunch of the modes this morning and settled on this one. And then, as I said, we're recording it. If you're online, the meeting chat is open and visible to everyone, but the chat really can't be kept. It can't be downloaded. And so let's keep that just for logistical issues. Board members, we've got a lot of items today where we're looking for your input, and always welcome your questions and feedback. So feel free to use the raise hand function or jump in during discussions. Members of the public, we will have multiple opportunities to give input today. The first one will be related to item 5, the gas production rulemaking. Then we will also have the just added public comment related to the bylaws as needed. And then at the end of the meeting, there will be time for general comments, which I do expect that we will have some commenters today. And then when we get to that part of the agenda, if you are virtual, please use the raise hand function up at the top. If you're here, you can submit the form to us, and we will queue commenters at the relevant points in the agenda. And then we'll notify you when you're online if you can unmute and speak. It does sometimes give a little bit of a lag, so just be patient. And then the comments, procedures, and guidelines are on in the first 2 pages of the meeting packet on our website. Particularly today, because we have a couple decision items, just input to the board on the information they are receiving or relating to how you want them to decide on the decision item is most important. Moving on to the director's report, doing some follow-up on last month's comments, or not last month's comments, February's comments. I know the MPCA has been following up with February's meeting commenter on greenhouse gas emissions and on nitrate and water quality. I am working with MPCA to find a good time for the board to get an update on the state's ongoing revisions to the climate action framework, including some climate modeling that's being done. That modeling, which is being done by the University of Maryland Center for Global Sustainability in collaboration with MPCA, is intended to assess the impacts of different policies and actions on future greenhouse gas emissions in Minnesota as part of the climate action framework. So that work includes modeling for transportation, electricity, buildings, and the industrial sector. So far, they've modeled 2 scenarios, which are current policies is one scenario, and then a net zero pathway, which includes current policies plus whatever is needed to reach the state's goal of net zero by 2050. And then there will be one more run on the policies of the climate action framework. That's already in progress. So we're targeting early fall for this discussion, just to give you all an update, and you can hear some of that. So that's some of the follow-up from February. Legislative updates. I'm so glad that all the commissioners are here since the legislature's on break this week. We have passed all the internal legislative deadlines and have started to see the creation of omnibus bills for both budget and policy items. The Senate Environment Omnibus Bill contains EQV funding at the governor's recommended levels and includes various policy provisions that were put forward through the executive branch policy process. The House Environment Omnibus Bill does not include those policy provisions, though a few of them passed through the committee separately. And it does recommend a slightly lesser amount of funding than the governor's recommendations. Conversations around data centers and appropriate environmental review for those kinds of facilities are ongoing. There also have been conversations about the gas production temporary framework, which has passed through the Senate but has not moved in the House. It is only April. Nothing is in its final form yet. So we will see how things move through the rest of the session when the legislature returns. In terms of project updates, a couple of gas calculator is available for folks that want to test drive it and check it out and see what it looks like. We have had some interest in that draft calculator, and we had asked if folks had feedback on it to get that to Steph by this Friday. Steph's been working with the contractor, and we do think that we can take comment through next Friday and still have that incorporated. So if folks want to look at that, by next Friday, April 25th, would be a great time to have comments. And if you can't find it, talk to Steph, and she will help you find it. But I think all the info is on the web. In terms of youth engagement, just an update for you all that we're working to partner with a program called Roots for the Future, which is a program that's being relaunched by Environmental Initiative that is designed as a multi-year STEM education and workforce development internship program for Twin Cities high school youth. And it's particularly designed to address the intersectional barriers faced by BIPOC youth who are interested in environmental careers. So they're just relaunching that program, and we're working with them to figure out what kind of opportunities we could potentially offer the students to do a project and come and talk to you all about it. It's likely to be kind of small this year and then hopefully growing over time. But I know you all have been really interested in youth engagement, and so that's what we're working for, and hope that we will have more to tell you about that shortly. And then another project update, we are working, the environmental review team is working on some training programs as part of technical assistance to RGUs and those interested in environmental review. And they are kicking off with an Environmental Review 101 webinar tomorrow, which already has over 250 people registered for it. So we're really excited about that opportunity. And we're reaching out and looking for other opportunities to support folks in learning about environmental review, working with counties and cities and finding conferences that we can go to. A lot of the training this summer will be about the greenhouse gas calculator, but we're looking for other opportunities as well. One final note today, and kind of a sad one, definitely a sad one. You all have in the packet this month some comments that were submitted after our February meeting about the groundwater policy report from Jeff Broberg of the Minnesota Well Owners Association. Mr. Broberg was at the meeting but had a technology glitch, And he submitted the comments afterwards. And I was very sad this morning to learn that Mr. Broberg was diagnosed with cancer at the end of March, and he actually passed away this past weekend. I think his comments in the packet really illustrate what he always demonstrated in his work with all of us, which was his strong technical expertise and his absolute passion for protecting groundwater, and particularly for private well owners in the southeast part of the state where he lived. So I know that he will be greatly missed by the groundwater community and the environmental community. So I wanted to share that. And with that, that is the report.
Thank you for that report, Executive Director Nuschler, and yes, very sorry about his past, Mr. Broberg's passing. But with that, any questions or comments on the Executive Director's report? Board members, no, not seeing any. Thank you again. So then next on the agenda is the Spring Pollinator Report update. Our presenter is Rebecca Gutierrez Moreno, and she's our State Pollinator Coordinator. So she will give us that update. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, members of the board here virtually and members of the public here and virtually. Again, my name is Rebecca Gutierrez Moreno, and I am the State Pollinator Coordinator with the Environmental Quality Board. And today I'm here representing the Interagency Pollinator Protection Team, or IPPT for short, to present to you the draft contents that we're planning to include in this year's Pollinator Report so that the board can give us feedback as they see fit. So let's all pray that this works. Oh, some of my slides are here. So I'm gonna just take a second for technology to catch up to us. Getting through these lines. Okay, so we can move on to the next one. Okay, so today I'm going to first start with what are the actions for the board after this presentation. Then I'm going to provide some background on the project, on the pollinator project, and then we're going to go over the outline of the draft contents of the pollinator report for this year, our next steps, and finally some questions and discussion. So the board today will hear a presentation that I will be giving about this draft contents for the pollinator report, and then the board may give us feedback on those contents. And just as a refresher, the authorities that we have for the work that we do to protect pollinators in Minnesota is given to us by Executive Order 1928, which directs the Environmental Quality Board to convene the Interagency Pollinator Protection Team. And you can see in that table what are the agencies that are part of this interagency team. 10 state agencies that have directed staff or allocated staff to be part of this team that we work together every month. We meet and we are convening to talk about the projects that we have, how can we collaborate, how can we work together to protect our pollinators. This executive order, besides the interagency collaboration, also has outlined pollinator protection goals, and it directs us, the Interagency Pollinator Protection Team, to present our progress to the board once a year with a report. Would you go next, Priscilla, please? Yeah, okay, that looks good. So our goals, our overarching desired outcome, or our like North Star, as we like to call it, is that Minnesota will have, we will restore healthy, diverse pollinator populations that sustain and enhance Minnesota's environment, economy, and way of life. And in order to achieve this desired outcome, we divide our work towards three main goals. Number one is that lands support pollinators, where a key outcome of more food resources, nesting, and overwintering site for pollinators. Goal 2, that pesticides are used judiciously and only when necessary, with the key outcome that we will reduce impacts to pollinators from pesticides through integrated pest management. And then goal 3, that Minnesotans understand, value, and actively support pollinators, with the key outcome of more action through community commitments. And it's important also to note that the executive order indicates which agencies are to lead each one of these goals. So for goal 1, we have DNR and Bowser as leads. For goal 2, we have the Department of Agriculture, and for goal 3 is actually the EQV. But it also tells all the agencies part of the IPPT that we are to work together to, figure out policies, programs that can help us lead action in these goals, for these goals. So after many years of doing this work, the interagency team also, we concluded that in order for us to align our resources strategically and to make sure that we are allocating the efforts appropriately, we needed an action framework. So we started developing that action framework in 2022 to 2023, and we engaged with the public, both with the general public, but also with experts in the topic, in the subject matter experts from different organizations outside of state agencies. And also, we also tapped in the expertise within state agencies as well. And so after this effort, and once this framework was finalized, which was after 2023, it was included in that report of 2023, in 2024, the interagency team focused our efforts in prioritizing the actions to prioritize the actions in the action framework in order to start implementing them as well. So we included that process of what that looked like in last year's report, and we already started implementing several of those actions. So for this year, we think that the main bulk of the report will be an actual update on how we're doing in that implementation process. And I will show you in one of the next slides how we're proposing that could look like. So the draft outline that we have right now, it includes an introduction, of course, for the report, the charge that we have, why are we doing what we're doing, then a section which has been popular in past years of 2025, this year's highlights for state agencies to showcase what are some of the main actions that have been successful this year. And then we will include the Pollinator Action Framework Progress Matrix based on the prioritization of the actions that we did last year. And that will also include some challenges for that implementation. What have we been encountering to highlight that as well, and some stories of success, both kind of like mix of successes from our state agencies, our interagency collaboration, but also successes from the public and other organizations that are also working to protect pollinators in the state. Finally, a call to action, because it takes all of us to protect pollinators, and an acknowledgement section. So this table is just an example. I'm using goal 3, that Minnesotans understand, value, and actively support pollinators. And this is just an example action that I'm using to illustrate how we think it can look in the report. So we will have where in the action framework this action is located. So the action is connect with communities that have adopted pollinator-friendly resolutions to learn from their experiences and strategize ways to engage cities that have not yet participated. That's like a general action that we have in the action framework. In order to implement this, we have several projects. One of them that we have started to work on is to organize a webinar to facilitate city-to-city connections to help pollinators. And we will potentially have also indicate which state agency or state agencies are leading that project. In this case, the EQV is leading this project, and who are our partners. So we have, for this example, the Department of Education and the MPCA's Green Step Cities program that we're connecting with to make this happen. And then finally, we will have a column with the status of that action. So in this case, this action has a status of in progress, but several actions may have a status of completed if it was finalized, or on hold, and we could indicate in the challenges why that action may be on hold, whether it's capacity, financial, something, or other priority actions that we're working on. And this will be for each one of the goals. goals, we would have a matrix showing the progress of the implementation of the action framework. So our next steps right now is just continue our interagency collaboration to implement the Pollinator Action Framework and also tracking that progress so that we can reflect that accurately to you all in the report this year. And just as a bonus slide, I just wanted to show some exciting things that EQB staff are going to be doing this year. We're going to be participating, and actually we're also sponsoring the North American Monarch Summit, which is in June. This is the first ever Monarch Summit that will have representatives from Canada, from Mexico, and of course from the US, and we will have a table there. And then we're also partnering with PCA again and DNR this year to celebrate pollinators with a pollinator day at the State Fair at the Eco Experience Building. And I think DNR will have exhibitors in their undergrounds on Pollinator Day. And then the IPPT is also organizing 3 pollinator webinars, one of them that I mentioned and the example of the city-to-city connection. But we'll also have one for fall and pollinators and the final one in December for farmers and pollinator resources. And with that, I feel like I went way faster than I thought I was going to. But thank you. And I'm open for any questions that you may have and any feedback that you may give me on these draft contents.
Thank you, Rebecca, for providing this update on the update of the 2025 report and all your work on this and your work with the agencies who provided all the input as well. With that, board members, any questions or comments for Rebecca? Feedback, yeah.
A sneak peek on 2025 highlights.
Oh, let me think if I have something that I can say publicly today. Well, we are actually collaborating. EQB got a lot of native seed packets. We got, I think it's 44,000 seed packets. And DNR also got like 20 something seed packets. And we are helping other agencies that may have events that they want to share. So we're sharing those seed packets with all our IPPT agencies so that we can raise awareness. And these seed packets have native, of course, native seeds. And in the background, there's a QR code that you can, scan, and then it leads you to our website that has a planting guide that we update every year with new information, with new things that are out there. So that's one example of our interagency collaboration.
Other questions or comments or input from board members?
Another one real quick. And I just want to let you know, thrilled that you're working with Green Step Cities. Nearly 100, well, over 150 cities and tribal communities participating in that. And I'm on the steering committee for Green Step Cities. So that's great. You're putting together a webinar, it sounds like, and helping to get the word out.
Yes, thank you.
And if you ever need a hand in strengthening that, happy to help in any way I can.
Thank you so much. I will definitely connect with you, board member. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I see a hand up from board member Brian. Go ahead.
Hi, just my repeated plea for some context with regard to the status of pollinators in Minnesota across the various ecotones, as well as what might be needed to restore a healthy population. So there's a lot in there about what's being done, which are all great programs, but then what we have now in some cases might be characterized as a checkerboarded, sort of disconnected bunch of habitat chunks that are about the size of a postage stamp. So I'm hoping there's some room in there for the report, or in the report, either in the introduction or elsewhere.
Thank you, board member Brands.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that comment. We're definitely considering that an update on how we're doing connecting pollinator habitats that may be patchy or scattered around the state.
And board member, okay. No, all right. Go ahead, Commissioner Peterson.
Yeah, just going forward to, I think I'm
kind of concerned about some of our habitat programs too and everything, especially our federally based programs. Many of them are farmers are assisted in those by the NRCS, and seeing the layoffs and program cutbacks and everything too. I think it'll be interesting to evaluate how that happens and everything. So a lot of farmers in my neighborhood, they've used the NRCS to help them with their pollinator plantings and partnership with the Soil and Water District. So I think that'll be really something we'll have to pay attention to and adjust as we look into this, because it is pretty severe what's happening and what's going to happen.
Thank you for that input, Commissioner Peterson. Great. And I see Rebecca's nodding her head, so she's noting that. And then I see a hand up from Board Member Hintz.
Yeah, thanks. Kind of echoing Ed's comment about the fragmentation piece. I'm curious if there's any structure or guidelines as you're approaching communities or municipalities around, like, I don't know, collaboration, I guess, maybe more of a joint powers agreement to work through the land issues where you could improve conditions. Again, without seeing a map in front of me of the fragmentation and how severe it is, I don't know if this is a relevant concept, but are there models for how communities and cities are working collaboratively on cross-boundary issues to create those pathways?
Thank you. Rebecca, do you have any thoughts on that?
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Hintz, and thank you, Madam Chair. So we are aware that there is a need there for us strategizing, for example, grant programs that help people install pollinator habitat or that help organizations install pollinator habitat to make sure that we're strategically locating those resources in places where there may be a need for a connectivity. So I know there are a couple of programs that are already thinking about that. I'm not at liberty right now to share exactly how, but I am hopeful that we can share some of that in the report this year.
Thank you. Any other questions or input? Rebecca. I have a question. Rebecca, you mentioned the North American Monarch Summit or Conference? Summit.
Yeah.
Where is that being held?
It's going to be held here in Minneapolis. Yeah, so the Monarch Joint Ventures are the ones organizing this event, and I know they have collaborators in the main, 3 countries where the monarch migration happens, and this is going to be the first time all these different conservation groups are going to get together and talk about how we can better strengthen our the work that we do.
Good.
It's going to be exciting. It's in June. I can't the 20s, but I need to check again exactly when.
Good. Well, I'm glad you're participating in that. That's all. All right. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions or hands up. I think we can move on. Thanks again for your work, Rebecca.
Thank you.
The next on the agenda, we have a discussion about a potential gas production rulemaking. This is a decision item. So the staff are recommending that you move forward with developing rules for environmental review for gas production. Our presenter is Jesse Kurzensky, our Environmental Review Program Administrator. So welcome, Jesse.
Thank you, Chair, board members. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jesse Kurzensky. I'm part of the Environmental Review team for EQB. And today I'm going to talk to you a lot about gas. Probably too much about gas, but that's okay. But specifically, we're going to talk about environmental review rulemaking for mandatory categories for gas production projects. So before I really get into everything, I do want to start the presentation with just kind of a background and reminder of all the enacted legislation and what drove that legislation. Kind of split that into 2 parts. There's really basically 2 parts, maybe 3 parts of that legislation. We'll talk about that. And then we'll get into the fun geology and all the exciting gas talk. And then I'll wrap it up with what that means for rulemaking and what EQB staff is recommending. So to go back to what's really driving all this, or what drove the enacted legislation, was an accidental gas discovery in 2011. There was a company actually exploring for copper nickel deposits, and they hit an unexpected pressurized gas pocket, which actually like launched their drill rig out of the ground. It was pretty interesting. I'm sure at the time they did sample that free flowing gas and ultimately sealed that well. Turned out there was elevated levels of helium in that sample. And so what then led to happen was that company was a copper nickel. So they really didn't care about the gas, really. They just wanted to close it and move on. But other people did care about that, as about a handful of years later, an actual helium production company came forward and did some additional work and evaluated that reservoir and actually drilled their own well, and did at that time provide information that production of that gas could likely happen within a year to year and a half. And then that highlighted actually Minnesota's lack of a regulatory piece to actually regulate any of the gas extraction in that type of industry. So legislation responded in May of 2024, a couple months after that production company did some more work to evaluate the helium underground, and identified the need for certain agencies to make rules in order to develop an actual framework in that industry. So the enacted legislation that took place did a couple of things. One of those was to provide a moratorium on the actual production of gas and oil until the actual moratorium states, I'm going to read it so I don't forget it, prohibits the DNR from issuing a permit for any production of gas or oil until rules are adopted, unless the legislature approves a temporary permit framework which allows issuance of temporary permits. So in that, the moratorium recognized rulemaking or temporary framework. So the rulemaking authorities within the statutes 93.514 identified that the DNR must make rules, while other agencies that are named in legislation may make rules. And then within that legislation, it also tasked the DNR with developing a committee. We've had some discussions and presentations in the past about that committee and EQB's involvement in that committee. The committee was ultimately responsible for providing a report to the legislation about recommendations that they see fit that would allow for the temporary permitting of these frameworks until rules are put into place. But again, those were not rules or statute developed or enacted by the agencies. So it's simply a report to the legislators that they could then use as they see fit to develop their own legislation, and brings us to where basically we are today. There has been two bills put together, both in the Senate and the House side. There's one on each. The Senate side has been through a number of committees and kind of gone through the typical process of being heard and discussed. I believe they still have one in taxes that they have to do. The House side, however, has not been heard on any committee. And so the ultimate resolution of this is still pretty much up in the air. We don't really know for sure where these bills are going to go, what will happen for the temporary framework. So we're going to keep an eye on it and just see what happens. But the big takeaway is that in both of these bills, there are no recommendations from EQB staff that were a part of that GTAC report. So if the current language proceeds to allow for temporary framework, or if one of these bills does proceed, there will be no mandatory environment review requirements during the temporary framework for a gas production project. So now I want to go back and talk about the second avenue of this legislation, which is the rulemaking, and point out sort of EQB's role within that. I mentioned that the DNR was called out as saying it must make rules for gas and oil production. For EQB, it did not say that directly. It said EQB may adopt rules. In addition, the legislation also called out that if any of the agencies within that legislation do proceed to rulemaking, they must do the expedited rulemaking procedures. And that would require the agency to publish the notice of intent to adopt rules within 2 years of that legislation taking effect. So I do want to dissect this a little bit because I think there's some important information here on how it's written and defines gas and oil production. We're glad this works. I can say next slide. So gas would include hydrocarbon and non-hydrocarbon gases. And then production was defined to include both extraction and beneficiation of oil or gas from unconsolidated or consolidated deposits under the earth within Minnesota. So beneficiation basically just means the removal of unwanted materials within that resource that you are attempting to collect. And then lastly, given that the legislation states that you must use the expedited rulemaking process if you do proceed with rules, that would mean that the intent to, or the notice of publication for intent to adopt rules would have to be done by May of 2026, given that this statute was enacted in May of 2020. So now that I've gone through kind of the quick recap of all legislation and why it happened, and I do want to go ahead right away and give you the recommendation from staff. So then we kind of get back into the background and all that fun geology lesson that comes next. So staff is recommending that board approve the resolution that would allow staff to then proceed with the rulemaking authority process that was designated from the statute for developing mandatory categories for environmental review for gas production projects. So that does only include gas. That is the second piece of that recommendation, is that staff is only recommending that we proceed with rules for gas projects and not oil. A couple reasons for that. One, mainly the geology of Minnesota is not conducive to producing oil. So that's a big takeaway right away. In addition to that, the agencies that are participating, who did participate in GTAC and are going to be doing rules or must be doing rules, are at this time not interested in including any oil in those legislation pieces. So ultimately, if the geology lies to us and we do find oil, there will be opportunity or requirement for those agencies to come back and do another rulemaking process to allow the production of oil. So if that happens, EQB would be able to kind of tail along on that process and conduct our own rulemaking to address environmental review for oil if needed. And lastly, part of this process, staff believes, is going to have some level of engagement about the actual rulemaking and what that looks like for mandatory environmental review for gas projects. And we think if we did include gas and oil, the same rulemaking likely lead to some input that we would not really be looking for at this time and cause problems with not getting the actual input on the projects that we think are moving forward now, which are gas projects. And so at this time, the resolution really is just to approve staff to start the process. Don't have draft rule language at this time to share. We're not that far. There's some pieces that we need to do to actually get to that level of input that we need to actually draft the rules. But we didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves at the staff level without having approval from the board, given that the legislation states that the EQB may adopt rules. So with that, we have hit the exciting geology portion of the presentation. So in order to really make a decision about the need for environmental review, that was pretty important for the board to feel comfortable about the understanding of gas and what these projects looks like and their potential impacts. So I really want to go back to simplify like the actual generation of gas and the understanding of why gas is here in Minnesota. So first off, this slide is kind of a basic cartoon representation of the actual geological deposition of more of a typical oil deposit. So not necessarily something we'd see in Minnesota, but certainly helps paint this general idea of where gas comes from and why it's underground. So ultimately, when we're talking about gas or natural resource under the ground, like gas or oil, there needs to be a parent or a source rock. Typically, these are buried way underground because they require significant temperature and pressure gradients to actually convert things into gas or oil. And then because these are buried so deep underground, there's usually some migration event of these resources required to actually get them to a mineable and accessible location. And also that migration event needs a confining layer to actually stop that vertical transport of those resources to keep it from continuing vertically and out the surface. And by doing that, then you allow over time this ability to accumulate and build these reservoirs of these types of gas and oil resources. And then once you have these resources developed, obviously you need to find them and then you can extract from them. For these types of scenarios, we're talking about wells. So from the surface, you're just simply putting a hole in the ground and pushing pipe down until you reach the reservoir. Typically then there are requirements that require you to case or cement the well in place that prohibits sort of contamination once you start to actually pull the resource up to the surface. And then you get to the production stage, which if you think back to the beneficiation type of definition in the statute that calls out our rulemaking authorities, when you have these gases, you're never talking 100% component of the gas that you're looking for. That usually almost always comes with some other type of piece that you need to pull out or get rid of. Commonly, you'll see nitrogen, carbon dioxide, or methane, something of that nature. And depending on the type of project or the regulatory pieces in place, those production pieces either need to be captured and disposed of in certain ways. They may be vented or they may be flared. So hopefully there aren't too many geologists watching because they probably didn't enjoy that oversimplification of what I just tried to tell everybody. But that's okay. Now I want to talk about what we're talking about here in actual Minnesota and the geology that is responsible for the type of gases that we experience. In Minnesota, we're really just talking helium and hydrogen. And sort of the driver for that is the Mid-Continent Rift, which was a geologic event that happened over 1 billion years ago. But that's not super important. The idea for helium specifically, if you think back to that last slide and you really boil it down to the basics, we have a parent or a source that generates the helium at a very deep source under the ground. And the geology of Minnesota is conducive to that. We had a migration event, which is the Mid-Continent Rift. It was responsible then for bringing that helium to actual accessible spaces. And then we also have the geology of the Mid-Continent Rift, which is perfect for actually capturing that gas as well. So we have those basic, generation, migration, and trap or confining layer, thanks to the Mid-Continent Rift. Now, when we get to hydrogen, it's a little bit of a different ballgame. We do still have that parent idea, that source rock, again, thanks to the Mid-Continent Rift. But we're not necessarily talking about sort of migration events and things of that nature, because hydrogen is developed through sort of these interactions between water and iron-rich rocks, which convert the minerals to another type of mineral, and in that process releases hydrogen gas. That process is called serpentinization. And so the rocks of the Mid-Continent Rift are full of olivine, which is an iron-rich mineral. And so the process of serpentinization is able to take place in these rocks and potentially produce hydrogen gas. Now, that can happen naturally, or it can happen in a stimulated fashion. So you can just basically do that process in a sped up fashion by introducing water to these rocks. Typically, it's more of like a brine type of situation that helps facilitate those reactions. Or these rocks have also been identified as potential areas for carbon sequestration. So ultimately, you would dissolve carbon dioxide into water, pump that water into these rocks, and you'd actually convert the carbon to a carbonate rock. So you're creating new rocks underground. But because these rocks are iron-rich minerals, the process of pumping water through there could likely also produce hydrogen gas in the same process. Now, those are very theoretical things to talk about in the geology. So where are we actually at in Minnesota now in terms of projects? So we do have helium. We know that we have helium. We have an active project proposer working in northeastern Minnesota, identifying land, and they have a couple of wells drilled. And they've published information about the flow rates and the potential to produce here. Both the wells are just over 5,000 feet in depth, and this is just east of Babbitt in northeast Minnesota, if in case you're interested in where it is. In addition to that, there's been some publications about sort of the production aspect of helium. Typically at the wellhead, you're just kind of scrubbing the unwanted gas and then it's shipped off as a gas. But for helium specifically, you can actually have another production piece to that, and that would be to convert the gaseous helium to liquid helium. And the project proposer has provided information to a number of publications saying that they're working on developing one of those liquefaction plants here in Minnesota. So likely gas production for helium in Minnesota is relatively close. We have 2 wells that are ready to go. They just can't yet, given the moratorium. There are not rules yet to produce. The moratorium does have a little bit of wiggle room, as you can still drill these wells as much as you want. It doesn't prohibit you from doing that. It just stops you from producing. So helium for sure is coming. One project proposer at this time. So we don't have much information about yet as to if that'll grow to more, or if it's just going to be maintained to this one single project proposer. But for sure here in Minnesota now, and if you compare hydrogen potential to helium potential, we're not even close, likely. A lot of the hydrogen potential is based on the science and these theoretical stage of development. But if you just simply Google hydrogen in Minnesota, you're going to get a gazillion hits. It is certainly a hot topic in the science world. A lot of research happening about hydrogen and its potential in these sort of igneous type of locations, which is the Mid-Continent Rift. During the GTAC process, there was an input period as well, which did draw input from 2 hydrogen producers. So obviously they're interested in what Minnesota's doing. And we do have one project that has published a little bit of information of them doing active work for hydrogen in Minnesota. Most of it's surface-based. They're just kind of doing some potential seismic work. They've done some soil sampling to identify if there are basically any hydrogen seeps in the area, but not any drilling at this time. And then if we talk about carbon sequestration, probably a lot of regulation that needs to happen in order for that to move forward, but certainly an interesting piece for the science to think about. So I've shared these slides before, I think, at a whole one of our earlier GTAC type of presentations, but I do want to go back to this to talk about now, what do these projects look like? What are they doing? And why does environmental review make sense? So when you're talking about a rig or a well, drilling a well for these gas, you're talking really about the same equipment that you use in sort of a typical oil and gas situation. So much bigger than our typical water wells we see in Minnesota. Some land development that needs to go into place to facilitate that equipment. I have some pictures after this, but typically about an acre in size, develop the space and the equipment needed to drill one of these wells. Sets up, generators. Typically, these are in locations that you're not going to be able to connect to power. So about an acre in size for just a well. And then given that the gas components need to be cleaned of some sort, and There's typically a level of production on site. Labeled here as an enrichment plant, ultimately collecting the actual resources you're looking for and shipping them out in some way to either further development or use. Now, when you talk wells, you rarely, at least for gas and oil production, so we're talking wells for gas production. Rarely are you talking a single well. You're typically talking these well pads, which include multi-well developments. Often that is done for good reasons. It limits sort of the impact of the surface. And you can sort of play these, when you have certain wells in the same area, they can play off each other, and production can vary from each well. So there is some benefits to having multi-well production, but typically, like I said, you're seeing about an acre of development for each well. So this is an image of the actual helium site in northeast Minnesota. So you can see the development that is necessary for just drilling the well there. Quite a bit of infrastructure related to the pieces that you need. Again, about an acre of development from this picture, just kind of general land use clearing and things of that nature, and the infrastructure of getting roads and things in place to access these areas. And this is just kind of a schematic drawing of what a very basic sort of production or enrichment facility will look like on a well pad. The pieces of information there probably aren't all that informative, but it is about another acre in size. So that is probably the more important thing to understand from that land use conversion perspective. So the potential environmental effects from the gas production project, pretty simplified here. Surface impacts just related to general infrastructure over land use change, potential impacts to sensitive resources from those land use conversions. Obviously noise, these things can run 24 hours a day. Typically the well drilling is 24 hours a day. The production may be a little bit different because they have different equipment. We did receive, during the GTAC, those are common comments from people that had, interest about environmental review and evaluating those sort of impacts. So I did include them here. But obviously you have subsurface potential impacts from a well, given that you're drilling underground. So potential impacts of water quality, and then, maybe some new things to think about depending on how hydrogen evolves during the comment period. For GTAC, it was one of the hydrogen companies did say that they did need the ability to stimulate the well, which is basically just another word for fracking, just the ability to release the gas from under the subsurface, and doing that via fracking or stimulating the well. And then, of course, air impacts, given that these are gases and they have unwanted gas components tied to them. Will they be vented or captured? Depends on the project and what they are capturing. And specifically the current helium project has indicated the desire to capture the high levels of carbon dioxide that are associated with that helium gas. About 70% carbon dioxide, 10% helium, 4% methane, and the rest is nitrogen. So that's just one sample. I'm sure there's quite a bit of variability as we learn more about that. So how does this look for mandatory environmental review? Given that we've sort of identified that these projects have potential environmental impacts, how do we proceed with, what do we need to do to proceed with a mandatory environmental review? Well, the statute first and foremost identifies the need for the board to identify categories of projects that require EAWs, EISs, or should be exempt. And so the threshold for an EAW is that a project may have the potential for significant environmental effects. The threshold for an EIS would be that the project does have the potential for significant environmental effects. So as we move forward, again, we are not quite to this stage yet of really developing all these ideas. But these are things that we'll have to think about in determining mandatory environmental review and thinking about when these types of projects may have potential for significant environmental effects and what those thresholds look like. Or if they do have potential for significant environmental effects, what those thresholds look like. And so when you talk about gas projects, there's a lot of different avenues that we could proceed to look at for mandatory environmental review, whether that be type of gas you're extracting, the volume of gas you're extracting, the size of development you might have. There's a lot of pieces in play here that we could start to evaluate. But we don't want to do that yet just because there's too many things to think about. We think it's important to really start that process with some input and do some engagement so that we can really be more informed about those processes. And then once we've done that piece, think about actually drafting rules. So to that point, I just probably went 1-2 slides too fast. The need for engagement for gas production projects really is going to be necessary because of all those things that I just talked about, and the development of a gas production process is a new industry in Minnesota. And so it's not necessarily an easy aspect to just kind of look at other mandatory categories and try to borrow what their thresholds might talk about. We did receive some input during the GTAC process from the tribes and industry and public and other environmental groups. We'll certainly utilize that information if we start the rulemaking process. And then there will be additional opportunities for board to see the actual draft rule language before the need to publish the intent to adopt rule by May of 2026. So this will not be board's last opportunity to talk about mandatory environmental review requirements for gas production projects. So with that, a reminder of what staff is recommending, and that would be to approve the resolution allowing staff to begin the rulemaking process to identify mandatory environmental review categories for gas production projects. That's it.
Well, thanks, Jesse, for all the background as well as leading us to the question about rulemaking. So, board members, any questions or input? Jesse, at this point? Board member Bauer-Kemper, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jesse, for the presentation. Maybe putting my foot in my mouth or embarrassing myself a bit here for not keeping up, but would we be making rules for any kind of gas? And are we referring to gas just as something that's in the physical state of gaseous? Or are we talking about helium particularly, or something else?
Sure, Member Bauer-Kemper. Yeah, so the statute sort of defined gas as hydrocarbon or non-hydrocarbon gas. So that would really be our limitations of evaluating types of gas, but it also is limited to gases that are basically located in the subsurface. So a gas that is being created underground. So not something that is happening at the surface, like a anaerobic digester, for instance, that might be creating gas at the surface, would not be part of this rulemaking idea of environmental review. It would just be limited to hydrocarbon and non-hydrocarbon gases located in the subsurface.
Okay, thanks. Do you have a sense that a singular set of rules can account for that paradigm of possibilities?
Chair, Member Bauer-Kemper, great question. Potentially, yes. I think if you proceed down this idea that gas production as an industry has similar effects no matter what type of gas you're producing, then sure, I think the rules could fit. Now, if we determine, or we through this evaluation determine that there are different impacts associated with hydrogen versus helium mining, certainly I think that is also an opportunity for the rulemaking process to define different categories of environmental review based on the type of gas. That is certainly an option.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that, Jesse. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Board Member Bauer-Kemper, for that question. And I see a hand up by Board Member Martin. Go ahead.
Hey, Jesse, thanks for the informative presentation. I have two questions. And the first one is just kind of what Member Bauer-Kemper was just getting at. I was wondering, I mean, you've talked mostly about helium and hydrogen, and I feel like I don't know if it would be possible to sort of address just those. Because I'm thinking about, natural gas is usually co-produced with oil, and I know this isn't about oil, and we don't really have oil production in Minnesota, and I don't know that therefore we have any scope for natural gas production in Minnesota. But you are saying like this is not just limited to helium and hydrogen, and could include hydrocarbons, and I just wonder if is that dictated by the rules we're following, or could we make this process simpler if it were specifically for non-hydrocarbon gases like helium and hydrogen? Or maybe that's not feasible, but I just had a similar question. I want to follow that up a little further.
Sure, Member Martin. Yeah, I think, given the statute language identifies, the authorities for rulemaking have to encompass or can encompass hydrocarbon and non-hydrocarbon gases. I think there's likely an ability for us as we proceed with rules to evaluate, should it include hydrocarbon and non-hydrocarbons? I don't think it's prescribed that we have to do exactly what it says. We have to do hydrocarbon, we have to do non-hydrocarbon gases. I think we could split those up if we felt like that was necessary.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it just feels to me like it may be that production of hydrocarbon gases in Minnesota is quite unlikely. So we're talking about something that, is not really an issue, but it still could, be a fear or something that we're enabling that when actually what we're talking about is hydrogen and helium. Anyway, just something to think about. And then on my second question was about hydrogen specifically. We've been hearing in recent years a lot more about production of hydrogen from, electrolyzers and renewable energy. And I don't, I know that that's not cheap either, but there are incentives going toward that. And do you have a sense that if that industry were to develop, could this type of hydrogen production from below the surface, is it actually realistic that could economically compete with hydrogen electrolysis? Is it maybe they're both expensive and we don't know yet what is more likely, or maybe they'll both develop in different parts of the state. I know that you're talking about the Iron Range where there's less renewable energy potential, so maybe they could both develop in different parts of the state, but just curious if you have a sense of that.
Sure, Member Martin. Yeah, that's a loaded question. I think there's a lot of potential, right? And there aren't a lot of people yet really pushing to the actual production level of hydrogen or natural hydrogen. If you look up hydrogen production, it's got a rainbow of colors,
right,
from clear to gold to green to blue. And so there are certainly all those aspects of hydrogen are taking place, and we're not seeing these natural mining of hydrogen yet. So I don't know that I have a great answer to know that it could supplant these other pieces. Now, I do know that a lot of those other development of hydrogen are pretty energy intensive. Now, you mentioned, the renewable piece that probably takes away some of that energy intensity. So certainly could. I don't think we quite yet know enough about the actual deposits in Minnesota if they are at these producible levels that would make economic sense, but certainly potential. And then to your other point about, the rules trying to encompass things, the person that I am in my normal life when I talk about rules and I look at rule interpretations, I would probably write that, or I prefer to, pursue that in a way that would be able to encompass all potential projects, rather than have to think about, well, we wrote it for this very specific project, and now these other projects are coming, and now we got to do those again. So ideally, I think that would play out that way, but I think, you know, the actual process of going through the rulemaking would help identify that a little bit smoother.
Hang on that.
Sure, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to add to that point that Jesse mentioned is I think there's this sense of like incentivizing a project versus sort of what Jesse was just saying, which is what's the potential for gaps. And I think we're going to have to look at what the other agencies are doing for permitting, because I don't think we want to be in a situation where we were overly specific, something else pops up and we've accidentally left a gap that we wouldn't want to have there. So that's just some of what we'll have to be balancing as we go through this.
Anything
you.
else, Board Member Martin?
No, thank you. That's all very helpful.
Thanks for those questions. So let's go to Board Member Smith.
Yeah, thank you so much for Chair. I appreciate that. And Jesse, thank you for the presentation as well. Two quick questions regarding the engagement process thus far through the GTAC. So I guess one would be, what was an overarching summary of those comments? And you probably received a lot, so I might be putting you on the spot there. And then I guess the second part of that question would, how do you see those comments influencing language that is developed through this rulemaking process?
Chair, Member Smith. So when it came to the input received at GTAC with sort of an environmental review theme, I'd say it was kind of all over the place. Probably the two biggest takeaways was the need for an EIS and that the PCA should be the RGU for these types of projects. There were certainly pieces that were included about, you know, the EIS would lead to tribal coordination or consultation. And so that was another theme. Otherwise, just kind of a wide array. Certainly, there was a lot of input from the whole process about the exploration piece of gas. Originally, the recommendations were to include the exploratory phase for environmental review, and that changed as the process went forward. So, you know, how would we utilize that information? I think we'll certainly reach out to those, the tribes and other folks, industries that commented while we start that process, and we start to develop sort of those categories or the types of environmental review thresholds that we should be looking at exploring. And I think in doing that, you know, there'll be a little bit more information. It won't just be focused on gas as a whole and the whole regulatory development of gas. So there'll be a little bit greater opportunity for direct environmental review discussions to happen. In that, in essence, be more informative than sort of a broad comment period.
I guess a quick follow-up, and I know no decisions are being made today. This is the start of the review process, but that idea of PCA versus DNR as the RGU, I'm just curious on that, and we'll be interested in hearing how those conversations unfold moving forward. And I'm sure the two commissioners that represent those organizations probably have a lot to say, so that might be a future conversation. So thank you.
For that question, Board Member Smith. Any other questions, thoughts for Jesse? We go to public comment from board members. Seeing any. So at this point, why don't we go ahead and move on to the public comment period? And this is particular to the decision on whether we should go ahead and, with the rulemaking process for gas production requirements. So if you are here in person to comment on that, we will call your name from the sign-up sheet and ask you join up here in the front of the room to speak. And if you're online, please raise your hand with the raise hand function if you'd like to comment, or note it in the chat. And Colleen will call on you, and then you'll be able to unmute yourself and speak online. And please be relatively brief with your remarks. And I'll let you know if we need you to wrap up your comments due to time. So with that, do we have commenters in the room on this particular topic for public comment?
We do not.
No, all right. So with that, for those online who would like to comment, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands raised. I think we'll go ahead then and close the public comment period, unless you're seeing anything. No? All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and close the public comment period. But thank you, board members, again for your comments. And so, board members, there is a resolution in your packet. It's page 11. And that states that the board wants to move forward and make the rules as permitted by legislation last year. So is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Member Katzenberger will make that motion.
Thank you. Motion by member Katzenberger. There a second?
Public member Nelson, second.
Thank you, board member Nelson, for that second. Any discussion on the motion? Not hearing anything, seeing anything. Why don't we then go ahead and the roll on the board resolution?
All right, thank you, Chair. So on the resolution concerning mandatory categories for gas production, Commissioner Arnold, not with us. Board Member Bakken,
Support.
Board Member Bauer-Kemper,
Yes.
Board Member Brands,
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham, present. Chair Daubenberger,
Yes.
Commissioner Gronval, Board Member Hintz,
Yes.
Chair Holman. He had to step out. Board Member Katzenberger,
Yes.
Commissioner Kessler,
Yes.
Board Member Martin,
Yes.
Commissioner Barilek, not with us. Board Member Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Board Member Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Stroman.
Aye.
That is 12 ayes and no nays and 5 not voting.
All right. So passes. Resolution passes.
We will get moving.
All right. Well, thank you, board members, for that. And Jesse, thank you for your work thus far. Yeah. Forward to hearing more. All right. So that brings us to the point of the agenda. We're going to take a 5-minute bio break. So why don't we please come back at
That's a little slow.
okay, we will come back at 2:27. Keep them, yeah. Well, thanks for coming back, everybody. We'll resume the agenda items for April meeting of EQB. So the next on the agenda is the bylaws, and our presenter is Executive Director Nuschler, who's been working hard on these. So with that, go ahead, Karen.
Right. Thank you, Chair. And I think Priscilla, were you gonna pull up the bylaws document here for us? Don't have any slides. So what I was gonna do today was just, so we took a first look at the bylaws in January, and you all had suggested several, more or less small changes to those. So I'm just gonna walk through and kind of talk about what's different since the January version. Since we didn't do it in track changes, but I'm gonna walk you through it. So we did not change anything in Article 1. The introduction. In Article 2 on membership and officers, under the section for duties of board members where it talks about not public data, we added a reference to Minnesota Statute 1302, which actually is the place where the definition is, both, I believe, the definitions of not public data and the definition of non-public data, which are different. One encompasses the other, but they are different. So hopefully that's clarifying. We also took some language that is in statute. And yes, there we go. And about that board members cannot delegate their powers and responsibilities. Moving forward, that previously had been under the voting section of this, but it felt like a more general sense, so we moved it up to this duties of board members section, because it is broader, excuse me, which is not to say that we do not always appreciate very much the participation of our proxy members. So thank you all for being here. In the section we didn't change anything in the section on committees. And then in the section on meetings, under closed meetings, there was the clause about whether or not minutes and recordings were available was a little confusing. So we just tried to clarify that they may not be available because it is a closed meeting. Under voting, we did remove that language about not delegating responsibilities because it was moved forward. But we did put in clarity from the rules about the fact that to pass an item, we need an affirmative vote of the majority of the board and not just the quorum that is present, and how we count that. So this section has more information about, it's a majority of members, it includes the chair, abstentions are included, but vacancies are excluded. So if we had a time period where we didn't have a board member, as we've had when public members have resigned, then that seat doesn't count. So that was the major change there. I know there were a lot of questions last time about that piece. Then under the section 8 on parliamentary procedure, with Robert's rules, based on our discussion in February, I guess, we added language here that the board does use the small board operational procedures, with the exception that we do require a second. In our discussions with the attorneys, how big do you have to be before the small boards don't apply? That's not super clear, but we don't believe there's any reason we can't choose affirmatively to adopt those procedures, which is basically how we operate anyway, in terms of informal discussion and not having to stand up to be recognized and things like that. So we did add that for clarity. The other major changes in response to the discussion last time in January is in Article 5 on staff. So in Part 3, at the top, we added more general clarity that the staff are responsible for daily operations of the administrative agency, and that we make those decisions following the board's direction and adopted policies and resolutions. In 3A, I don't believe we changed anything regarding the executive director position. If we scroll down to 3B, thank you, Priscilla. The current 3B is was added again to recognize the general expertise of the staff, that they have policy, technical, and program expertise, and they carry out their responsibilities related to implementation of the board decisions, the strategic plan, the work plan, statutes, rules, and executive order. And then we listed some of our particular work about pollinators, the water program, public engagement and communication, and then administrative support. And then what previously had been 3B related to environmental review is now 3C and speaks to the technical expertise of the environmental review program staff and some of the places where they conduct administrative pieces on behalf of the board. So I think that section has not particularly changed. There was a little bit of added language about sort of they provide technical expertise on the program, but the duties are basically the same. And then in Part D, we just added a note about the technical representatives. So these are roles that are defined in rule, and they're staff of our member agencies that are designated representatives and support their agency's participation in the board. So they are not EQB staff, but they are really important conduits of information. And since it's in rule, felt like it was important to add it here. So those are the major changes on the meat of the bylaws. We also did make a change, Priscilla, don't scroll away just yet, on adoption and amendment. I think originally we said the bylaws may be amended by a 2/3 vote. Based on your feedback, we did change that to a majority vote, especially since our rules require that we have a majority vote of all board members for everything anyway, no matter who's in the room. So those are the changes that we made. And I would say we did put a resolution in the packet to adopt the bylaws if the board is ready to do so today. I think we could probably make simple changes today. If changes get too complex, I'm perfectly happy to redraft, and come back. So however the board chooses to want to move forward with these.
Well, with that, why don't we go ahead and, first of all, thank you for your continued work on there and addressing the comments, questions that came up from board members in recent discussions. So with that, though, let's go ahead and go to board member questions, comments, or further input on this. Go ahead, board member Bauer-Kemper.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Catherine, for all of your work and staff's work, and folks from Attorney General's office too on this. And thank you also for enduring lots of back and forth with me through the process. I guess I have a question, a procedural question. I have two amendments that I think are simple. I mean, not conceptually, but language-wise. I have two amendments for us to consider, and I'm wondering when the proper moment is to broach those.
I think you did raise this in thinking through the parliamentary procedure. I think if there aren't questions, then the motion would be in order to approve the bylaws. So we put that forward, and then you would want to make a motion to amend them, and we would then take that motion up. I was saying to someone this morning, it's a little bit like math. You open a parentheses, and then you open the next parentheses, and then you close that parentheses, and then you go down. So that's how I'm thinking of it, which I think is correct.
Okay, well then please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, and I'll wait till that moment. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, board member Bauer-Kemper. So we will come back to that after we move forward. A motion to approve this, we'll go to the amendment process at that point. So then with that, I'll go back to any other questions or comments on this from board members. Seeing any. And we talked about public input process for this too, or public comment period, excuse me. Would we do that after the amendment?
To you, Chair.
I think we probably. Hear the amendments first and then before going to a vote, why don't we have a public comment period?
Yeah, I think he can describe what he's desiring to do. I think that.
Okay.
Without making a motion to amend it.
Ah, okay. Why don't we do that? Then we'll go to public comment period, then we'll make the motions. Okay, so board member Bauer Kemper, let's go back to you. We're not going to move this just yet. We'll take the amendments at a certain time, but why don't you go ahead and describe your amendments, and then we'll take the public comment period after that.
Okay, sure, thanks. So I have two ideas for us to consider, both of which I think would fall in Article 4. And the first one, I know that we're just using the chat for logistics, but I'll use it for logistics in case folks find reading easier than hearing. There we go. So I want us to consider adding this sentence to section 6 within Article 4. It was the one just referred to on voting. And that the section already stipulates that, sorry, I'm scrolling to it here, that an affirmative vote of a majority of all members of the board is necessary to take action. And so this kind of appends to that, but I think for the grammar and flow of that paragraph would just go as the last sentence. And as you can see in the chat, it reads, "No one shall act to indicate that the board has taken a position unless the board has indeed taken such a position." And so that's the first of the two suggestions that I have. And then the second one would also go in that same article, though down in section 9, and it's about the agenda, kind of the creation of the agenda. And I'll put that over here too. And so this is just moving or bringing more language from existing rule into the bylaws. So most of the language on creating the agendas there in Article 4, Section 9 is already from law, but there's another piece of it. So the rules stipulate that agenda items are proposed to the chair, and the chair has the discretion to decide which of those things actually end up on the agenda. And then the chair is also to advise the board which suggested items were not included on the agenda. And so I'm suggesting here with the second idea that the obligation that's already entrenched there in rule be reflected also here in the bylaws. So those are the two ideas. Thanks.
Thank you, board member Bauer Kemper. So why don't we?
Madam Chair,
Yeah,
can I just ask a question of board member Bauer Kemper? And on your first suggestion, is there a reason you are suggesting to append that to paragraph 6, which is largely about the mechanics of voting, rather than under Article 2, section paragraph 5, where it B, where it says members shall not act or speak to represent the board on any subject unless the board's position has been officially determined. It seems like that's the concept that you're getting at, the section you've suggested. So it's like the concept makes sense to me, but the section you've suggested really is about the mechanics of how a vote is determined, not what happens after the vote, how people talk about the vote. So I'm just curious on your thought process there, if that might be helpful as we think about this.
Sure, thanks. Yeah. I actually, it doesn't matter to me where, if the board were to support the language that I've put there, it doesn't particularly matter to me where it would go. But what I have in mind is that this would apply to anyone that the bylaws apply to, not just the board members. I'm supportive of, what would that be? Article 2, Section 5, subsection B. That's a perfectly fine provision as far as I'm concerned. But that section, that article is about board members, and my proposed amendment is about anyone that's engaged in board business. So that's why I thought that Article 4, Section 6, where it defines what is required to establish a board action, that I thought was a relevant context for this potential added provision, because I'm referring to the indication of board action. But I'm open to putting it wherever. Thanks.
And I'm sorry, Member Bauer Kemper, could you read your suggestion again there at the end of that paragraph?
Sure. So the
I
sentence.
couldn't write that fast.
Yeah, no, that's fine. The sentence would read, no one shall act to indicate that the board has taken a position unless the board has indeed taken such a position.
Let's go to public comment. And then we can discuss that further. Okay, so with that, yeah, we'll go to public comment on these bylaws, and do we have anybody here wishing to speak in person on the bylaws? Comment in person on the bylaws. Thank you. All right. And so again, this is just particular to the bylaws, public comment period. And I see a hand up online. So Colleen, you want to go ahead and
have a Willis Madison. So we'll unmute you, and it might take just a second or two for you to be able to speak. But when you are ready, please share your comment. You should be able to speak.
And you might need to unmute yourself too. Is that right? On Mr. Madison's end?
Yes, Chair, that is correct. We can allow you to unmute, but you have to push that unmute button yourself.
We're going to try another thing on our end. It looks like you might be having trouble. So we're going to make you a presenter, and you should be able to speak now. You can unmute yourself and
Mr. Madison, are you able to unmute yourself?
if you're trying to speak and want to put something in the chat, just let us know. And we'll try to come back to you. We just want to make sure you're still there. But we'll see if anybody else has any comments that they'd like to make, and then we'll circle back and try you one more time. Mr. Madison, or sorry, Willis Madison, are you able to speak? Can you unmute?
Madison, are you able to type anything into the chat?
There are no other hands raised at this
Okay,
stage.
thank you, Colleen.
There's nothing in chat.
Yeah.
Maybe if someone could type something in chat and see if he can respond to that, and we'll move from there.
Oh, we do have one other hand raised.
Oh, okay.
Michelle Jordan. Oh, never mind. It's not a hand. It's just entering the meeting.
Oh, okay. All right. See if Mr. Madison can respond in the chat.
Works great until it doesn't work great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, sorry, Mr. Madison, that we weren't able to hear you or see comments from you in the chat. So we'll need to move on and go to moving forward with the bylaws. So with that, do we have a motion to approve the bylaws as they appeared in your packet?
And then we talk about.
And then we'll
Yeah.
talk
Oh,
about
yeah,
the
no, this is Commissioner Kessler. I can make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Commissioner Stroman will second.
Thank you, Commissioner Stroman. Hazel, are you? Oh, okay. I didn't know if there was some testing going on there to try to get the commenter back. All right, well, we have a motion and a second. So now we'll discuss the motion. I think this is where we can then take a few minutes too. So discussion on the motion and proposal for an amendment.
Madam Chair, can you put the chat back up only because
Yeah.
I can't, I also did not write down what Board Member Bauer Kemper had suggested, and it's helpful to have that to
Have it
refer
right.
to. Yes, thank you. And maybe I'll say something.
Sure, go
Let's
ahead.
get it started.
Commissioner
So hold on, just for parliamentary, can we have Board Member Bauer Kemper formally offer one of these before we discuss it, since he has not done that?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Good. Go ahead, Board
Does
Member
he
Bauer
need to
Kemper.
formally offer it only if he, as a motion, or can he offer it for discussion?
I suppose you can offer it for discussion, but let's,
It's up to him.
Yeah.
It's his idea, but I think he has a choice on that.
okay,
I
Okay,
don't think he has to make a motion for us to discuss it.
I believe that is correct.
Okay, well then I'll suggest that we discuss. I suppose if I'm not making a motion, we can discuss either of them, or you want to go one at a time? Let's discuss the first one that I've worded as no one shall act to indicate that the board has taken a position unless the board has indeed taken such a position. Thanks.
thank you, Board Member Bauer Kemper. So discussion on a potential motion, which would provide an amendment to this. Go ahead.
Sure,
Commissioner
just,
Kessler?
just to get it started, appreciate this Board Member Bauer Kemper. And just because I don't speak parliamentary in my daily basis, like the whole point of this is so that nobody is misrepresenting the board, right? Like if we have something in front of us or have taken a vote and that vote has, or either has not been taken or didn't go a certain way, no one on the board should misrepresent what was done, right? That's the point of this. I guess that's a question, the Board Member Bauer Kemper. I'm just just to be helpful for me to understand why.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, that's the spirit of it, but the distinction between what is already in the draft regarding board members, I'm suggesting that we broaden that out so that it would include the scope of these bylaws. So it would include staff, it would include tech reps, task forces that might be appointed. But the spirit, yes, that is right. I'm suggesting that the scope of it be broadened out a little bit, and it's a bit more specific or narrower than the language that restricts board members. So I hope that helps.
That is helpful to me. Thanks.
And thank you for that discussion. You know what, it's now flagged that we do need to have the amendment brought forward as a motion to have discussion on it. So that's different than what I just told you, Board Member Bauer Kemper. So if you want to go ahead and make a motion to propose this amendment, that would be good.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, so I move that we amend Article 4, Section 6, and add to the end of it the following language. No one shall act to indicate that the board has taken a position unless the board has indeed taken such a position.
Thank you for that motion. And is there a second on this amendment, on this motion for an amendment? That's Board Member, our Chair, or Board Member Bakken, right?
Let's see if we can get the hands in order. So Board Member Bakken and then Board Member.
Yes. Board Member Bakken, are you raising your hand for the second?
This hand is up.
No, I raised my hand prior to the making of the motion, so I guess I'm not seconding it. I have a question.
Okay.
This is Member Katzenberger. I will second it so we can move forward with discussion.
Thank you, Board Member Katzenberger. All right. So any discussion on the motion? Had some discussion on the motion now. So we'll go to Board Member Bakken.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess my question in reading this is, it looks like we're broadening this, but how do you police that? I mean, if we're referring to staff and technical people and whatnot, are we creating a hornet's nest as far as, or is this trying to just give the bylaws some teeth so that if you do have someone that's making condescending remarks or something, you can have something to fall back on? But I guess that's my big question is, how do you police this extension of the board?
Thank you for that question, Board Member Bakken. Board members have thoughts on that.
So this is Dan. I guess what I would now do, since we're in parliamentary procedures, I'd offer a friendly amendment to Member Bauernkemper. Maybe we could say no one's subject to these bylaws. Right, because like if it's just no one and it's members of the public, they're not subject to the bylaws anyway. So.
Okay, so we have a friendly amendment to the amendment.
This is where it gets the question.
We could get Board Member Bauernkemper's thoughts. I suppose we need to have it as an amendment motioned in order to then discuss that, right?
So
Well,
if Member Bauernkemper agrees it's a friendly amendment and he's willing to amend his amendment, I think we can take it. If he is not, then it would be, we need a motion to amend the amendment to the motion.
Got it. Okay. Go ahead, Board Member Bauernkemper.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Yeah, so that's perfectly fine with me to add that language that Board Member Katzenberger has mentioned. No one subject to the bylaws shall act, so on and so forth. And then I'll just respond, perhaps unhelpfully, to Board Member Bakken's good question by saying that I don't know. I don't know how these bylaws are enforced. I think the question that Board Member Bakken has asked probably cuts across the board throughout these bylaws. I think they provide guidance for how we go about our business, and so they shape how we should do things, and we should be accountable to them. But I don't imagine that there's policing of them in some kind of post-punitive way, but rather that they provide some emphases and some reminders and some expectations for how we do things. And so my suggested amendment here, which I'm happy to revise in accordance with Member Katzenberger's suggestion, is intended along those lines to provide a reminder, a guidance, and emphasis that we take good care in the work that we do. Thanks.
Madam Chair, Board Member Bauer-Kemper and I have been discussing this, and I think it is a little bit confusing in the fact that we have you, the board members, and then we have the staff, and together we are the Environmental Quality Board, and our language at any moment in terms of who has, if we're talking about something, are we talking about something that the board decided and voted on, or are we talking about something that's different than that? I think it's difficult sometimes in one's language to be precise. And so we have talked about that and about, that the staff will be working to be, more precise about those things. But I think that's where this is coming from, is just to provide some of that clarity about what, and as Board Member Bauer-Kemper and I have talked about this, it's not meant to, I guess it's meant, my understanding, Board Member Bauer-Kemper, is not necessarily meant to be restrictive so much as clarity is your intent.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And as Executive Director Nuschler knows, that is the backstory. The EQB putting out recommendations, putting out positions is different, and so this is narrowly about official positions of the board, and that there should be no. We all need to be careful not to imply, not to indicate that the board, as the proper board, has taken a position when we haven't done so, and that's the emphasis, to be clear about that, not to be restrictive. I'm totally supportive of all the affirmative statements throughout these bylaws that empower everyone who is subject to those bylaws, and so this does not conflict with any of that.
Board Member Bauer-Kemper, go ahead, Commissioner Strowman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that exchange between our Executive Director and Member Bauer-Kemper was helpful. What I was going to say is I do not support this as proposed. I think, one, because the section to which it is proposed to be appended is literally about the mechanics of voting, and this is about something different. And sorry to be a governance nerd, but I am one. So it just doesn't fit in this section. I think, it is to the extent it covers board members, it is covered in the section on board members. I think that if the goal is to cover staff with respect to representing actions or positions taken by the board itself, that could go in the section on staff, Article 5 on staff. I think we could easily do something there. What I don't want to confuse it with is positions of the EQB as an administrative entity, because I think there are times where staff are called to offer opinions on the EQB's role on things. I can think of a number of legislative situations in which EQB is often called to offer advice on issues. And I think what I heard you say, Member Bauer-Kemper, is those are not the situations you're trying to cover. This language where it says that the board has taken a position unless the board, you're literally meaning the board. I just don't want that misinterpreted to the EQB generally. And so I would put it under that Article 5 staff and make it specific to actions of the board. And then it parallels the way that it's represented for board members themselves.
Let's go to Board Member Bauer-Kemper.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Stroman. That's indeed very helpful, and you have further clarified indeed what I'm getting at here and the narrowness of it really. And it does arise from confusion surrounding the distinction that you're talking about, the distinction between the EQB as an administrative agency and its staff and staff using their expertise to make recommendations and statements and have views. And I indeed want to distinguish between that process and the process of the board taking positions and making official actions. So I'm also open to moving this anywhere and to making it parallel with that. What is it, Article 2 up there? As I'm talking while thinking, which I probably shouldn't do, there are the task forces that I would also like to be gestured toward, which is not in Article 5, and I also don't mean for this to like be particularly about staff, though if there's momentum in that direction, I'm certainly open to that. Thanks.
Board Member Bauer Kemper. I think maybe we'll need to think about the placement of a statement like this, about if there's additional clarification needed, and bring it back. I think we need a little more discussion on this, and I think having it as a item in the draft suggested. In a suggested location would be good for board members to be able to know exactly what we're voting on. So why don't we motion or?
So we do need to sort of finalize this motion. What I'm hearing, Madam Chair, is potentially that we vote, we table this, we table the whole concept of voting. But the first thing we could do is we need to wrap up this motion, either by voting on it, or I suppose Board Member Bauer Kemper could withdraw it with the understanding that we're going to, consider the idea for a future meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll withdraw the motion under that assumption. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Bauer Kemper. And then I suppose we need to withdraw the motion for the bylaws in the first place.
Do we want to talk about the second thing or no?
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and have, let's see, we need it moved though to have a discussion on it, right? But
So then if I'm understanding our choreography here, I'll move the amendment to Article 4, Section 9, adding the clause, and the chair shall advise the board of all submitted matters not placed on the agenda.
Again, Member Katzenberger will second that so we can get into discussion.
Yeah. And Madam Chair, again, I would like to understand the why behind this. Like, is it because we think that there are things that are being raised that should, like, for suggestions to the executive director that we, like, for example, public people would like things on the agenda and she is deciding not to do that and we don't know about it? I'm just wondering the why. So if Board Member Bauer Kemper could explain the why, again, that'd be great.
Board Member Bauer Kemper?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner, and thank you, Chair. This one is abstract in the sense that there's no known problem that I'm trying to solve. It's simply that the rules that govern the EQB already have this in there as a provision. And so I thought that the bylaws should reflect the existing rules that are in place. And I thought it's a useful procedure just to kind of keep us all apprised of things that might be bubbling up. And even while we may not have time to talk about them, or they may not fit into a particular agenda, when I was looking through the rules, setting them side by side to the bylaws, it seemed that they might as well align with what's already in rule, and that that this would be a worthwhile thing, potentially productive. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Bauer Kemper. And so that's another consideration we'll be working on for bringing the draft back for the next time. So again, we won't be voting on this today, but I think Board Member Bauer Kemper, if you could then withdraw your amendment for today, since we're not going to vote on it.
Unless anyone has.
Yeah, unless any other board members have anything else you want to say on it before we conclude the discussion on the second amendment.
Madam Chair, just for clarity, are we not going to vote at all on the bylaws?
Not
Okay,
today.
thank you.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Not today. We will plan to take these potential amendments under consideration and bring back another draft for next month.
Okay, thanks, y'all. Appreciate your patience and working through these. So I will withdraw the amendment that currently is sitting there in the hot seat, and we can move on in whatever direction the chair thinks is best. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Bauer Kemper. Anyway, the public commenter thinks he might have squared away his
Right.
audio. Should we take that today for consideration, or should we wait till we're voting on it?
I think we do want, if the commenter was specific to the bylaws, I think it would be great to have that comment at this time.
Why don't we go ahead and do that? So Colleen, could you unmute Mr. Madison? I think he is still connected.
Lilith Madison, you should be able to speak now. Can you try your microphone? We're going to try one more thing to see if we can elevate you. All right, so yes, it looks like you might be able to. Yes.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm having trouble navigating the technology, and thank you for your patience. In reviewing the bylaws, I note the absence of any provisions for public participation. And I'm wondering if it would not be appropriate, if not by its virtue of the symbolism and the openness of the EQB to public participation, that there be some provision in the bylaw. I don't have a specific amendment to suggest. I just think that there ought to be an article that deals with public participation. If you're going to postpone the actual adoption of this, they might take the time to examine some possible language that would reflect the EQB's willingness and openness to full and robust public participation.
Thank you for that comment, Mr. Madison. And under advisement. So as we mentioned, board members, we will go ahead and
Table the resolution on the approval.
Yeah, so this is Dan. I will move to lay on the table the motion under discussion for future discussion, future action.
And this is Commissioner Kessler. I will second that motion.
Thank you, Board Member Katzenberger, and to Commissioner Kessler. Motion and that second. And then we need to vote to table.
If we do, we probably should. Go ahead. And
Yes, we'll go ahead.
do that.
Any discussion on the motion to table this to next or to a future meeting? Not seeing any. All right, so we'll call the roll to table this to future meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everybody, for your parliamentary patience. So we are voting on a motion to table approval of the EQB bylaws to a future meeting. Commissioner Arnold, not with us. Board Member Bakken.
Yes.
Board Member Bauer Kemper.
Yes.
Board Member Brands.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham. Not with us. Chair Daumenberger,
Yes.
Commissioner Gronval,
Yes.
Board Member Hint,
Yes.
Chair Holman. We had to step away. Board Member Katzenberger,
Yes.
Commissioner Kessler,
Yes.
Board Member Martin,
Yes.
Commissioner Verelak is not with us. Board Member Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Board Member Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Stroman.
Aye.
Unanimous for everyone who's here. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, so look forward to further discussion on that agenda item, the bylaws for the QB. And then that brings us to the last, generally last item on the agenda, which is the general public comment period. So with that, this is a chance for you members of the public to provide input to the board about issues related to the board's review or authority. If you have a question for the board or ETB staff, I will ask staff to note that and get back to you at a later time. If any other board members are interested in hearing about or being involved in the follow-up, please let me know. And this ensures we have enough time at a meeting for all commenters to provide input at the board meeting and for all questions that can be fully considered. So with that, if you've signed up to comment in person, please come up to do so. And then if you are commenting online, please raise your hand with the raise hand function and Celine will call on you. So
We do have one member of the public in person here to comment.
we'll call on Berlin. Johnson Berlin.
It, excuse me, it's an unfortunate Commissioner Arnold is not here today. Commissioner Arnold testified in Senate, in committee that Senate File 2393 is prematurely cutting back on solar energy production through changes to net metering and sunsetting of community solar gardens. Commissioner Arnold also testified that the Department of Commerce finds the proposed changes will have an adverse effect on both the economy and the environment of the state of Minnesota. You can find Commissioner Arnold's testimony in the Senate Energy and Utilities Environment and Climate Committee meeting on April 7th. I'm here to try to support Commissioner Arnold. Excuse me. On January 30th of this year, the press release for the greenhouse gas emissions report to the legislature, Commissioner Kessler was reported as follows. Investments in Minnesota has made over the last 3 years will get us back on track to meet our greenhouse gas reduction goals. I challenged that statement in the February EQB meeting. Commissioner Kessler has had 2 months to review the work of the PCA staff and the University of Maryland. Will Commissioner Kessler yield to a question?
Why don't you finish your public comment and with that question, and then we'll see if follow-up happen later or if there's
Okay.
further comment.
The primary thesis of the 2025 greenhouse gas emissions report attributed to Commissioner Kessler on January 30th was not true. The work of the GCAM model is scheduled to be completed by April 25th. There is still time for the legislature session, in this legislative session, to provide the citizens of Minnesota with the information we need to push back on bad environmental policy currently being advanced by the legislature. I call on Commissioner Kessler to reissue the 2025 greenhouse gas emissions report with the following changes by noon on April 30th. Update the data through 2023 so trends since the pandemic can be better understood, and include the GCAM modeling of current policies 2023 base at least through 2028 consistent with the state biennial budget. This will allow us to join Commissioner Arnold and present a fact-based argument to the Minnesota Senate that is premature to curtail distributed solar energy projects via changes in the net metering and community solar. The EQB can be the catalyst for this action. I call on the citizens, members of the EQB to request a vote today to reject the greenhouse gas emissions report and request that MPCA reissue the report with the recommended changes by April 30th. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Other comments?
Yes, Chair, we have one online comment right now. Hudson Kingston, if you can unmute your line, and we'll see if we can get comment.
Sure. Can you folks hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a deal with Catherine that she'll cut me off if I talk too long. So just go ahead and shout at me. Okay, Catherine? Thank you for taking my comments. My name is Hudson Kingston, and I'm legal director for CURE. CURE works with rural communities to protect the places we work, live, and care for, and I'm speaking to you from Ely. At the end of October, we asked the PCA about the status of the permits for this Mesabi Metallics project and received a polite message back that permits had been applied for, but that it was a work in progress. Looking at the What's in My Backyard page, the 2012 major air permit expires next month and has not been reissued at this time, so it still appears to be in process as far as the public knows. A couple of weeks later in November, we contacted DNR, an assistant commissioner, and asked what the status of environmental review was for this project and asked how CURE could support DNR in making the decision to do environmental review. This was 6 months ago to the day. 6 months had passed since DNR was asked by the public how it was thinking about environmental review for this mine and processing plant. 2 weeks ago, we received a response which has been submitted to you as a public comment. This document is addressed to the project applicant, but appears to be a litigation position, as it clearly states that the only recourse to the decision is to sue the DNR. This is deeply disappointing and is why I felt the need to speak it to all of you today. In the 5.5 months between my inquiry and the DNR response, no objective information has been shared as far as I can tell about this project. NPR ran a puff piece this morning about how the company planted one tree and might use hydrogen somehow someday. But beyond that kind of cherry picking, there hasn't been much to speak of on this project that isn't directly from the company or their lobbyists. This is a major mining project on the Iron Range, but all that seems to be available about it is opinion and hearsay. If there's time, I'd be happy to lay out the various ways that the DNR's environmental review need decision is demonstrably incomplete and inadequate. But suffice to say, if someone did want to sue on this analysis, they would win. But fundamentally, I just wanted to ask, why should the Minnesota agencies only follow the law, follow their legal duties when they are sued? Why is this project's objective facts hidden within the permitting branches of these agencies rather than effectively presented and summarized for the public? MEPA is a truth-telling law. No new mining company that is proposing to open a new mine with new technology and new leases should be afraid of a little bit of truth. They should welcome it if they want to be part of the community they're building upon. MPCA documents from 2021 clearly show that this project will emit significant amounts of mercury. By contrast, the mercury analysis that DNR relies on is 14 years out of date and has no relevance to the current scientific and policy reality. The reality is that the state is not going to meet its deadline to control mercury pollution under a statewide TMDL this year. This harm to Minnesota lakes and rivers is cumulative. The existing taconite plants are already having significant impacts on the environment through this toxic pollution, and the facility will add to that and further take the state out of attainment. This is a clearly significant impact on its face. It affects tribal members, other anglers, and people who live in the area and consume fish, water, and wild rice from our lakes. Importantly, only environmental review allows your agencies to look at this problem holistically and do a cumulative impact analysis. Only by using the data that the MPCA already appears to have can the public understand how this project fits with others that emit mercury and how we can finally get out of the mess that we find ourselves in. Smith Foundry, Northern Metals, Water Gremlin, and the DNR's failed attempt to not do environmental review for Milepost 7. These are all recent environmental scandals and failures that taint the reputation of your agencies. Don't add Mesabi Metallics to this list. Clearly, the permitting process is going to proceed in the meantime, but please don't assume that rural people are less than other Minnesotans just because we live far from the cities. We should be able to trust that the fish we catch and the water we drink is somewhat safe. And by failing to follow the law, you potentially add to the mistrust and list of scandals instead of demonstrating that the state agencies value and concern and have concern for the public health. The rule of law is on the ropes in this country right now. Minnesota agencies have an opportunity to step up and show their values. And this is a great example where you could take the win and do an EAW that shows how this process fits within our environment, economy, and society. We ask that the EQB and probably the MPCA work together and perform an efficient environmental review that gives the public unbiased information about this project and especially its cumulative impacts on low income and tribal members and all the folks who live in this area. Or you could ignore the facts and law and make a political decision, further alienating rural folks who don't feel like the government is listening to them. I would be happy to answer any questions you have or meet with you to discuss this further.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Kingston, for your comment. As Catherine noted, you got that right in under 2 minutes. So I don't. Oh, okay. Or a few anyway. All right. Thank you for that comment. Are there any other commenters?
Or no other
No other hands up.
time, Chair.
All right. All right. Well, thank you again, commenters now and the other comment periods throughout the meeting too. So with that,
Chair.
yes, go ahead.
Can I just, I do just want to know, because I know there was a written document handed out to EQB members, and I know it was provided via email to folks who are not in the room. I do just want to note that included in that is a 69-page memo that is the documentation of DNR's decision related to the environmental review. So you do have the detailed documentation of our decision there. It is based on law and EQB rules. If the EQB wants to take further look at this, I would fully support that. But I do just want board members to recognize that documentation, which is not required by EQB rule, but DNR does do it as a matter of practice for transparency. Madam Chair, I just also, given some of the language that was used in the written piece that was supplied, and I think what has become far too often at EQB, I would ask that in EQB board meetings, since EQB is a state administrative agency, that it not become a place where people can, through public comment, malign state employees. I think respectful difference of perspective is welcome. I want to be the first to say that difference of opinion is welcome here. We want members of the public to speak, but discrediting state employees by referring to them as St. Paul bureaucrats, assigning motives and values that they may or may not have is inappropriate, and I think not consistent with workplace standards that we have as state agencies. And so I just would ask that this be a place where differences of perspective and respectful debate is welcome, but that remarks that go to, whether they are written or verbal, whether they go to staff's professionalism, their motives, or their values, that EQB not be a place for that. Thank you for allowing me to make that request.
And Madam Chair, if I might, I will provide the whole board with our responses to Mr. Schmal. We've had a number of exchanges with him that have gone to Chair Daubenberger and Executive Director Neuschler and get at many of the things that he has raised, and would also reiterate that it is important as we express differences that we do it respectfully. And I want to maintain that expectation as well.
Thank you for those comments. Commissioners Stroman and Kessler. And I'll also mention too, certainly we have policies, state agencies around respectful workplace. Really appreciate it. The public would also be respectful in their comments. So bringing up comments for the EQB board to be considering.
Madam Chair, if I may, I think both of the comments today did bring up some questions concerning EQB's authority. And so if there were any of those questions that the board would like to ask the staff to pursue, to answer for you, we would be happy to take that direction.
Go ahead. Chair and Executive Director Nuschel, I just want to clarify, and this may or may not be helpful, that the report that Mr. Schmal is referencing is a legislative report that is owed to the legislature from the MPCA and Commerce. It is not under the EQB's authority. That may be very dissatisfying, but that is the reality.
We do have another commenter at their board member.
Yeah. Are there other board member comments at this point? Or we go back to public comment? Okay, not seeing any. So it looks like another hand is up.
We have another comment, Chair, from Willis Madison. Willis, fingers crossed it works this time on the first try.
Go ahead, Mr. Madison.
Chair will try to elevate him and see if that works.
Okay, is my microphone working?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, the technology on Teams has become very challenging. With respect to the comments that have been coming in that appear to be somewhat derogatory, I share the difficulty I must exercise in being as restrained about these topics as I can. I'm a former MPCA employee of 28 years, retired. I'm an ecologist, and I want to comment with regard to the Pollinator Report that has been periodically been produced. And the kindest, most diplomatic term I can apply without being personal is that it demonstrates what I would call cognitive dissonance. The scientific community and the public takes great exception to the characterization of the status of pollinators and insects in Minnesota and around the world. To ecologists and the scientific community, we're in a 5-alarm fire situation, yet the report that goes to the public and the legislature doesn't reflect the dire situation we're in with the collapse of insect populations around the world and consequent cascading collapses of avian species that rely on them. And so I'm wondering if there's a opportunity where scientists could bring the body of work that is assembled in the literature that basically contradicts or at least is very, very different in terms of the degree, scope, scale, and schedule by which we must respond in order to stop the decline in not only pollinator populations, but in insect populations. I will admit that maybe I'm partially responsible so that I don't appear before the EQB and regularly deliver the kind of literature that I review regularly that points to the disastrous decline in these populations. So I will own that, but I'm wondering if there is a special channel by which we could introduce these kinds of information that would seem to be it's such divergent understanding and characterization of the situation. So I'd be open to any response or suggestion you have as to how to close this gap between what is known in the science and what is being reflected in these reports.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Madison, and we can take that under.
I think we can
Consider
your advisement, Madam Chair, for the report. And of course, as we were just speaking about the bylaws and the agenda, if there's things people wish to bring forward, you can let me know and the chair and I will discuss them for consideration. I guess I will just note, we are interested in bringing more voices before the board, and that's actually part of some of the discussion we're planning to have next month at the board meeting of how we might do that and increase engagement. So more to come.
Thank you, Director Nuschler. Okay, any other public commenters? So again, thank you, commenters, all those who commented today for your comments. And we will close out the public comment period and move on to the very last item on the agenda, which is closing and adjournment. So we've reached the end of the agenda. Is there any further business? Not seeing or hearing anything. And then, so with that, I will just go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your participation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.